The night sky was calm, but then it changed. The stars bent, the moon shook, and a giant shadow covered the earth. Every screen, every radio, every voice device turned on by itself. People in villages, towns, and great cities stopped what they were doing. Because one voice spoke across the entire planet. It was the alien lord. He was tall, cold, and covered in silver armor that looked alive. His eyes glowed red like fire, and his voice was deep, almost like thunder rolling over mountains. He laughed, and the laugh was cruel. He said that humanity was weak, small, and unworthy of standing among the stars. The alien lord told Earth that other alien races had watched humans for centuries. They saw humans fight each other, burn forests, and destroy oceans. They thought humans could never rise, never survive among the strong races of the galaxy, and now, the alien lord had come to deliver his final judgment. But instead of destroying Earth, he said he wanted to play a game. A cruel game, a joke. He lifted his hand, and from the blackness of space came a strange object. It was like a crystal shining blue and red at the same time, but it pulsed like a beating heart. The object landed in the desert, shaking the ground for miles. The alien lord laughed again and told humanity that this was his gift, his joke. He said, "Touch it, use it, and you will know what it means to suffer." And then the screen went black. The sky returned to normal, but the earth was never the same again. At first, people thought it was a trick, maybe a hologram, maybe a dream. But satellites showed the crystal in the desert, standing taller than a skyscraper, glowing like fire in the night. Soldiers surrounded it, scientists studied it, leaders argued about it, no one could agree. Some said it was dangerous, that it should be destroyed before it cursed the planet. Others said it was a chance, maybe even a gift that could lift humanity into the stars. But when the first man touched it, the world changed. He was a soldier, brave but unsure. He walked close to the crystal and placed his hand on its surface. The crystal burned like fire, and the soldier screamed, his body shook. Light ran through his veins, and then he fell. Everyone thought he was dead. But then he stood up. His eyes were glowing with the same light as the crystal. For a moment he looked powerful, untouchable, but then his body twisted, his skin cracked, and he fell again, lifeless. The alien lord's cruel joke had begun. Fear spread across the earth. The news showed the soldier's death, his glowing eyes, his final scream. People were afraid to go near the crystal, but not everyone feared it. Some believed it was a test, and if one man died, maybe another could survive, so more people tried, and the results were terrifying. Some died instantly, burned from the inside. Some survived for a few hours, their bodies glowing before they collapsed. But a few, just a very few, lived, and they changed. These few humans gained strange powers. One could move objects without touching them. One could hear thoughts. Another could heal wounds with a touch. They were different, and the world watched them with fear and awe. The alien lord returned on the screens, laughing at humanity's pain. He said, "Look at you, desperate for hope. Desperate for strength even when it kills you." He called the crystal the joke of the stars and promised that it would break Earth apart. He said humanity would tear itself into pieces, fighting for the power that the crystal gave. Then he vanished again, leaving only silence. The world was split. Some saw the survivors as monsters. Some saw them as heroes. Governments wanted to control them. Armies wanted to use them, but no one could stop the truth. The alien lord's joke had already planted its seed, and humanity was standing on the edge of something far greater than anyone could understand. The night sky was calm again, but in every human heart there was fear. And hidden under that fear was something else. A small spark, the spark of defiance, because even if the alien lord laughed, even if he mocked, humanity was not done, not yet. And that was the beginning, the joke that shook humanity, the cruel game that would one day become their greatest power. The world had seen many strange things, but never something like this. A crystal from the stars glowing in the desert, killing many but giving power to a few. It was not only a mystery, it was a wound that divided humanity. Because for the first time, every country, every leader, every group of people asked the same question: what should be done with the alien lord's joke? In the United Nations, leaders argued day and night. Some shouted that the crystal was a curse, a trap that would destroy humanity if it was left alive. They wanted to bury it deep underground, or launch it into the sun. Others claimed it was a treasure, a chance to stand equal with the alien races that mocked humanity. They said humans must study it, must learn its secrets, because power was the only way to survive. Ordinary people were no different. Some prayed in fear, saying the crystal was a punishment from the heavens. Others worshipped it, calling it a gift, building cults and temples around the idea that the crystal was holy. There were riots in the streets, chants for destruction, chants for protection. The world was tearing apart, not because of the alien lord's attack, but because of the human response. Scientists worked in secret labs, trying to break a piece of the crystal. Every attempt failed. The crystal healed itself as if it were alive. No machine could cut it, no fire could melt it, no chemical could weaken it, but still they studied the survivors. The men and women who had touched the crystal and lived. Their bodies glowed at night. Their blood carried strange patterns. Their eyes shone with hidden fire. Doctors were afraid to touch them. Soldiers were afraid to stand near them. But governments wanted them under control. The survivors were given names. Some were called the Touched, others the Broken, and some called themselves the Chosen, whatever the name. The truth was simple, they were changing. One young woman could hear whispers in the minds of those around her. She cried every night because she could no longer sleep. Every thought around her felt like thunder in her skull. Another man set fire to everything he touched when his anger rose. He begged to be locked away. One boy could move stones with a glance, and children on the street ran from him in fear. They were both feared and desired, cursed and praised, and through all of this, the alien lord watched every few weeks. His face appeared again on the skies. He laughed at the chaos, he laughed at the broken families, the burning cities, the divided nations. He said, "I told you, little humans, my joke is not just a gift, it is a mirror. It shows who you really are." He was right in one way. The crystal was not only changing bodies, it was showing the soul of humanity. The armies of the world began fighting for control. One country surrounded the desert with soldiers, declaring that the crystal was theirs alone. Another country sent drones and missiles to destroy it, but the weapons simply melted in the air. As if the crystal rejected them soon, wars began on Earth. Not alien wars, but human wars. Blood spilled not because of the alien lord's hand, but because of human greed and fear. Still, some voices called for unity. A small group of scientists, soldiers, and survivors formed a secret alliance. They believed the crystal was dangerous, but also believed it was the only chance for humanity to rise. They began training the survivors, helping them control their powers, helping them survive without losing their minds. It was not easy, the survivors screamed in pain. Some died, some begged to quit. But the group pushed on, because they believed humanity could not run from this challenge. They believed the alien lord's joke could be turned into something greater. On the streets, the fear grew deeper. Parents warned children not to go near anyone who glowed. Churches shouted that the end of the world was near. But in dark corners there was hope too. Whispers spread that the survivors were fighting back, that they were training, that maybe one day they would stand against the alien lord. It was only a whisper, but whispers have power. The division of Earth was now complete. There were those who wanted to burn the crystal, those who wanted to worship it, and those who wanted to master it, and above them all, the alien lord laughed, but in his laugh, there was something strange, something hidden, because if one listened closely, they could hear not only cruelty, but also a hint of fear, as if the joke he had played was starting to grow into something he had not planned. The night sky was filled with stars, cold and endless, but on Earth, the fire of division burned hotter than ever. Humanity stood at a crossroad, and every step forward was uncertain. Would they destroy themselves with the alien lord's cruel gift, or would they rise higher than anyone ever imagined? That question remained in the air, heavy and sharp, and no one, not even the alien lord, could answer it. The world was breaking, but inside the cracks, something new was being born. For months, the survivors of the crystal had been feared, hated, and hunted. They were called monsters, weapons, or even demons, but in the shadows, away from the eyes of armies and governments. The first signs of true power began to show. One survivor was a young woman named Alara. She had touched the crystal when she was only 17, and for days her body burned with fire. Doctors said she would die. Soldiers waited outside her room with guns. But she did not die. Instead, she woke one night screaming, and every light in the hospital burst into flames. The soldiers ran, the doctors hid, and Alara stood shaking with eyes that glowed like suns. She had survived, and something inside her had awakened. Another was a man named Cade. He was a soldier who had touched the crystal out of duty, not desire. At first, he too collapsed, his heart stopped. But then he rose, and when he rose, the ground beneath him cracked with a single step. Stones lifted from the earth as if they were weightless. Cade could move mountains with his will, and yet he felt fear more than pride. Because he knew this power was not his alone. It came from something beyond human. These stories spread, whispered first in fear, then in awe. Children whispered of the girl who burned with light, the man who could move the earth. Old men shook their heads and said this was the end. While young dreamers said it was the beginning, the division of earth grew deeper, but so did curiosity. Because humanity had always feared the unknown, but it had also always chased it in secret. The survivors gathered. Some wanted to hide, some wanted to fight, but all wanted to understand. They trained in abandoned factories and broken deserts, in quiet caves where no eyes could see them. It was not easy. Some burned their own skin. Some broke their bones when their strength grew wild. Some even lost their minds, but every failure taught them something. Every scar became a lesson. One night, Ilara stood in the desert. Staring at the stars, she raised her hands, and fire wrapped around her arms like living snakes. For the first time, she did not scream. For the first time, she felt control. Her fire did not burn the sand. It danced in the air, shaping itself into wings, and in that moment, she realized something the alien lord never expected. The power was not only pain, it could also be shaped by will, her heart, her spirit. At the same time, Cade trained in silence. He carried heavy stones on his back, pushed mountains of rock, and lifted broken tanks like toys. But he was not proud. He was not drunk on strength. Instead, he thought of his fallen brothers, soldiers who had touched the crystal and died screaming. Every lift, every push was not for himself. It was for them, and in that pain, his control grew sharper, his strength steadier. He was no longer just a soldier, he was something more. Others too found their gifts. A boy who could heal wounds with a touch, saving his sister when no doctor could. A woman who could hear voices across cities, warning people of danger before it came. A child who could bend metal as if it were paper. Building shelters from broken ruins, each one was proof that humanity was changing. That the cruel joke of the alien lord was turning into something he did not plan. But the alien lord did not stay silent. He appeared once more across the skies, his cruel laugh echoing through every city. He said, "You believe this is power, but it is only a chain. It will choke you, it will destroy you, and you will thank me when your world is ash." Yet when he spoke, his voice was different. Behind the laughter there was a shadow, a crack of doubt, because the alien lord saw what others could not. He saw that humans were not breaking, they were adapting, and no other race in the galaxy had ever adapted so fast. The people of Earth were still divided. Some called for the death of the survivors. Others begged to worship them. But deep inside, a seed of hope was growing. Because if even a handful of humans could survive the crystal, if even a few could turn pain into power, then maybe humanity was not as weak as the alien lord believed. Ilara stood in the desert with her fire wings. Cade lifted stones that once buried him, and the boy healed his sister's wounds. They were only a few, but they were enough to spark a new thought in the hearts of millions. Maybe the cruel joke was not a curse, maybe it was a test. And if it was a test, then humanity was beginning to pass. The first signs of power had arrived. Small, fragile, and dangerous, but real. And though fear still ruled the earth, though blood still painted the streets, there was now something else in the air. Not just fear, not just division, but the first whisper of strength. The kind of strength that grows not from gifts but from struggle. The kind of strength that could one day shake the stars themselves. The world was still full of fear, but something was changing in silence. The survivors of the crystal were no longer just victims of the alien lord's cruel joke. They were becoming more than survivors. They were becoming teachers, warriors, and symbols. And in the shadows of broken cities and secret deserts, the first sparks of hidden strength began to shine. Ilara was no longer the frightened girl who set fire to everything she touched. She had learned control. She could summon flames and shape them like blades or wings. Her fire no longer burned her skin, it obeyed her heart. And every night she whispered to herself, "This power is mine, not his." Her fire was no longer a curse. It was a promise. Cade, the soldier, grew quieter with every day. He trained with stones, steel, and mountains themselves. He did not lift them for pride, but for memory. Each stone he carried reminded him of the men who died screaming when they touched the crystal. Each broken tank he lifted reminded him that humanity could rise from the ruins. His strength was not just in his muscles. It was in his discipline, his patience, his will, and in that will lay a strength that no alien weapon could measure. The boy who could heal became known in whispers as the Light Child. He touched wounds, and skin closed, bones healed, breath returned, but every healing left him weaker, drained. As if he gave pieces of his life to others, he never complained. Never asked for thanks, he said softly. If this power takes my life but saves 10 others, then it is worth it. And people began to follow him, to protect him, to believe in him. There were others too, each with powers different and strange. Some could bend sound, others could twist shadows. A few could move faster than the eye could see. Not all survived the training. Not all lived long enough to master their gifts. But for each one who fell, another rose stronger. Because humans were stubborn, they refused to stop even when the pain was unbearable. And that stubbornness was something the alien lord could never understand. The secret alliance of survivors grew into something larger. Scientists, soldiers, and even ordinary citizens began helping them. Abandoned warehouses became training grounds. Underground bunkers became schools. Here the survivors practiced not only their powers, but also their humanity. They learned to work together, to trust each other, to fight as one. For the first time in history, people from different nations stood side by side, not because they shared a flag, but because they shared a danger. Meanwhile, the alien lord returned again. His face covered the skies. His voice roared across oceans. He mocked the survivors, calling them freaks of chance and children of death. He promised that their powers would tear them apart, that they would fight each other until nothing remained. And yet in his laughter there was a pause, a silence, brief but real, as if even he could see what was truly happening. The cruel joke was no longer breaking humanity. It was sharpening it. The world was still divided, of course. Many still feared the survivors, many still called them monsters. Armies still tried to capture them. Governments still fought for control. But the survivors no longer hid like shadows. They began to appear when fires raged in a city. Alara arrived to burn a wall that saved children from collapsing rubble. When earthquakes shook villages, Cade lifted stones to free the trapped. When sickness spread in a camp, the Light Child touched the sick and gave them hope. And the people who once threw stones at them now whispered prayers for their safety. The hidden strength of humanity was not just in powers. It was in sacrifice, in courage, in unity. Because while other races in the galaxy grew strong from technology or from conquest, humans grew strong from struggle, from pain, from the fire of survival. And that strength, once awakened, could never be destroyed. Still, danger grew. The alien lord was not blind. He watched the survivors grow. And he began to send smaller tests, creatures of shadow and steel that crawled from the desert where the crystal stood. The beasts attacked villages, towns, and camps, tearing apart walls and people alike. The survivors fought back. And though many died, the beasts were defeated. Each victory came with scars, but also with proof. Proof that humans were learning to fight back. Proof that the cruel joke was becoming a weapon. On a quiet night, the survivors gathered in the desert. They looked at the crystal, still glowing, still beating like a heart. None of them touched it, none dared. But they stood together, silent, watching. And in that silence, a bond was made. They were no longer strangers, no longer broken individuals. They were the beginning of something greater, something the alien lord never imagined. The stars above were cold, endless, and cruel. But on Earth, fire burned. Stones moved, wounds healed, shadows bent. And all of it came not from a gift, not from mercy, but from struggle. Humanity's hidden strength was rising, slowly, painfully, but surely. And for the first time, the alien lord's cruel joke no longer looked like a curse. It looked like the beginning of a storm that even the alien lord might not be able to stop. The alien lord had laughed for too long, and his laughter had turned into anger. He had given Earth a cruel joke, a crystal that broke more lives than it saved. But now he saw that humanity was changing, adapting, turning pain into strength. And so he decided to test them in a way that could not be hidden. He unleashed the first wave of his creations. They came from the desert where the crystal stood. Dark creatures shaped from metal and fire, beasts with claws sharper than swords and eyes glowing red like his own. They crawled out of the sand in the thousands, roaring like thunder. At first they moved toward small villages, burning everything in their path. But soon their eyes turned toward the great cities. The alien lord wanted the world to bleed. He wanted humans to break before they ever tasted hope. The armies of Earth tried to fight. Tanks rolled across deserts, jets filled the sky. Soldiers fired their guns until their hands shook. But the creatures were stronger, faster, unafraid of death. Bullets only slowed them. Missiles only scattered them. The ground trembled under their charge, and humanity felt once more the shadow of extinction. It was then that the survivors stepped forward. Ilara's flames lit up the desert night, wings of fire spreading across the sky. Her fire burned the creatures. Cutting through their steel skin, Cade stood like a wall, lifting fallen tanks with his bare hands and throwing them like stones at the beasts. The light child touched the wounded, saving lives in the middle of battle, his own body shaking with every healing. They were joined by others, men and women who had survived the crystal and now carried powers the world had never seen. The first clash was chaos. Creatures roared, survivors screamed, fire and steel filled the air, but for the first time, humanity did not retreat. They fought back, not as scattered soldiers, not as broken nations, but as one, and in that unity, the battle began to turn. Ilara burned a path through the enemy lines, her fire carving symbols of hope in the night sky. Cade broke the ground beneath the beasts, sending them crashing into pits of sand and stone. Others bent sound to confuse the monsters. Some twisted shadows to blind them. For every human that fell, 10 more stood, their courage feeding each other, their strength growing with every scream of defiance. The alien lord watched from afar, his red eyes burning in silence. He expected chaos, he expected betrayal. He expected humans to turn on each other. Instead, he saw something he had never seen before. He saw humans who refused to break, who fought even when they knew death was certain. And worse, he saw them winning. The battle lasted for 3 nights. Cities shook, deserts burned, oceans carried smoke across the horizon. But on the dawn of the 4th day, the creatures were gone. The survivors stood in the desert covered in blood, ash, and scars. But they were alive, they had won. It was not just a victory of strength. It was a victory of spirit for the first time. Humans realized that the powers from the crystal were not only a curse. They could protect, they could save, they could fight back. The world saw Ilara standing tall with her fire wings, saw Cade lifting ruins to free children, saw the light child saving the dying even as his own life grew weaker, and whispers spread across the earth, whispers that grew into cries. Maybe we can fight, maybe we can survive, maybe we can win. The alien lord's laughter did not fill the sky this time. Instead, there was silence, heavy and cold, because the cruel joke had given birth to something he feared. The power of unity, the power of hope, the power of humanity itself. But the survivors knew the truth. This was only the first battle, the first victory. The alien lord was far from done, and his strength was far beyond anything they had yet faced. Still, victory mattered because it planted a seed of courage in every human heart, a seed that whispered, if we can win once, we can win again. That night, as fires burned low and the wounded rested, the survivors gathered together. They did not celebrate, they did not cheer. They sat in silence, watching the stars. Each one carried scars, each one carried pain, but also something new. They carried the weight of victory, and in their eyes was the same silent message. This is not the end, this is only the beginning. The first victory belonged to humanity, small, fragile, and paid for in blood. But it was theirs, and for the first time. The alien lord's cruel joke was no longer just a wound. It was the beginning of a weapon that would one day shake the galaxy. The alien lord had never feared humanity. Not once when he first came, he saw them as insects, weak, divided, easy to crush. He gave them the crystal as a cruel joke, expecting them to tear themselves apart, but now, after the first battle, something strange began to grow inside him, a feeling he had not known in centuries, a shadow he thought was gone forever. The alien lord was beginning to feel fear. From his throne in the black void of space, he replayed the battle over and over. He watched Ilara's fire spread like wings, burning through his beasts. He watched Cade break the earth itself to bury his creations. He watched the light child heal the wounded even as his body grew weaker. These humans were not just surviving. They were changing. Every death, every scar, every tear was making them stronger. And strength born from pain was the most dangerous kind of all. The alien lord's generals tried to comfort him. They said the humans were still few, their powers unstable, their world divided. They said victory was still certain, that humanity was only delaying the inevitable. But the alien lord did not answer. He stared into the void with burning eyes. because deep inside he knew the truth. This was not the end of humanity. This was the beginning on Earth. The survivors also knew that the battle was only the start. The world was in ruins. Cities burned. Millions had died. But for the first time, humanity did not kneel in despair. Instead, they began to rebuild. Faster, harder, stronger than before. The survivors became symbols. Their names whispered in songs and prayers. Ilara, Cade, the Light Child, and others like them were no longer just feared. They were becoming heroes. Ilara stood before crowds. Her fire now a beacon instead of a curse. She told them, "This power is not his, it is ours. It is the fire of humanity, and it will not be broken." Cade trained soldiers, teaching them not only to fight with guns but to fight with will. He said, "Courage is stronger than fear. Discipline is stronger than chaos," and the Light Child healed where he could, his fragile hands giving hope even when his body trembled. Their strength was not only in powers, it was in their hearts, their will, their unity. The alien lord could not ignore it. He sent new waves of creatures, stronger, darker, faster. But each time humanity fought back, and each time they learned. They built weapons to match their new gifts. They combined science with power. And slowly, the joke that was meant to break them became their greatest teacher. The galaxy began to whisper too. Other alien races who once mocked humanity now watched with unease. They had seen many worlds fall under the alien lord's hand, but never had they seen a world fight back this way. They asked themselves, what are these humans? And how do they turn death into strength? Even their enemies began to wonder if humanity was becoming something unstoppable. The alien lord grew restless. He walked across his throne room, his claws scraping the steel floor. He could not admit it to his generals, but the thought echoed in his mind. What if humanity was not a mistake? What if they were a threat? The cruel joke had planted a seed, and that seed was now growing into a storm. And storms had a way of spreading beyond control. On Earth, the survivors continued to rise. New ones appeared each month, some with powers of light, some of shadow, some too strange to understand. Not all survived. But those who did added to the growing force. They formed groups, not armies, but families. Bound by blood and sacrifice, they trained together, fought together, suffered together, and in their unity, they became something the alien lord had never seen before. A people who refused to die no matter the cost. The alien lord appeared once more in the skies. His voice colder than ever, he told humanity, "You think you have won? But you have only delayed your death. I will come myself, and I will burn your world to ash." His laughter thundered across the earth. But this time it did not echo as before. This time, people did not fall to their knees in fear. They stood, they shouted back, they raised their fists to the sky, because now they had seen victory. Now they had touched hope, and hope was stronger than his laughter. The alien lord ended the broadcast in silence, but when the screens went dark, his claws trembled against the throne. He had laughed, but deep inside his laughter felt hollow, because he knew what he had never admitted, not to his generals, not to himself. The cruel joke was no longer his, it belonged to humanity now. And the day was coming when the joke would no longer make him laugh. It would make him fall. The stars above were still endless and cold, but on Earth something brighter was rising. A strength hidden in the hearts of humans, a strength no alien had ever seen before. And in that hidden strength was the promise of something greater. The promise that one day even the alien lord would fear not the crystal, not the power, but humanity itself. The alien lord had promised to return, and the day came. The sky above Earth split apart. Stars vanished behind the shadow of his fleet. Thousands of warships burned across the heavens, their lights drowning the moon itself. It was not a raid, not a test, it was war. The alien lord had come to end his joke with fire and blood. The people of Earth looked up and felt fear, but not the same fear as before. This time they were not helpless, this time they were not alone. For now the survivors stood among them, no longer hidden, no longer cursed. Ilara, Cade, the Light Child, and hundreds of others who had endured the crystal stood ready. Behind them stood soldiers, scientists, and ordinary people who had learned to believe in something greater than themselves. The alien lord's voice thundered across the earth. "You were nothing, you were insects. Now you are fools who believe in hope. I will burn that hope. I will bury it under the ashes of your world." His laughter shook mountains. But this time humanity answered. Voices rose from every city, every village, every battlefield. They shouted not in fear but in defiance, when we are not broken, we are human, and we will not fall. The battle began with fire raining from the skies. Warships fired beams that cut mountains in half. Cities shook under the weight of destruction. But humanity fought back, not only with weapons of steel, but with the power born from the cruel joke itself. Ilara rose into the sky, her fire wings brighter than the flames of the alien cannons. She burned through ships, carving paths of light across the dark. Cade stood on the ground, lifting broken towers, throwing them like spears into the sky. The light child touched the dying, each healing, burning away his own strength, but he did not stop. Others joined them, survivors with gifts beyond imagination. Some bent the air to shield cities, some froze entire rivers to block the alien march, some turned shadows into blades that cut through armor. Everywhere humans fought, not as one army but as one people, and for the first time, the alien lord saw something he had never seen before. A race that refused to kneel, a race that grew stronger with every wound. The alien lord himself descended, his body towering above the ruins. His silver armor pulsed with dark energy. His eyes burned brighter than suns. He looked down at Ilara and Cade, his voice cold. "You are sparks, I am the fire. And I will crush you." He struck, and the ground shattered, waves of power breaking the earth. But Ilara rose through the smoke. Her fire clashing with his, Cade stood beside her, his strength holding the ground together, and in that moment, humanity stood face to face with its tormentor. The battle with the alien lord shook the world. Every blow from his hand split the earth. Every strike from the survivors lit the sky. Ilara burned, Cade broke. The light child gave the last of his strength to heal those who fell. One by one, the survivors threw everything they had, and together their powers began to merge. Fire, stone, light, shadow, all of it rising into a storm greater than any single human could create. The alien lord roared in fury. His laughter finally broken. He tried to crush them, but the storm only grew stronger, because it was not just power from the crystal. It was something else. It was the will of humanity, the refusal to break, the strength born from pain and unity. And that was something even the alien lord could not stop. With one final surge, the survivors struck together. Ilara's flames, Cade's earth, the light child's healing light, and the gifts of all the others fused into one. A wave of pure will and power crashed against the alien lord. His armor cracked, his roar turned to silence. His body fell to the earth for the first time. The galaxy's tyrant tasted defeat. The battlefield grew quiet, smoke rising into the sky. The alien lord lay broken, his laughter gone, his power shattered, and in his fall humanity stood tall. The cruel joke he once gave had turned into their greatest power. Not the crystal, not the strange gifts, but the spirit that bound them together. The spirit that said no matter the pain, no matter the cost, they would rise. The people of Earth wept not in fear but in triumph. They had faced the strongest enemy they had ever known, and they had won. The survivors stood together, their bodies scarred, their hearts heavy, but their eyes burning with hope, because they knew this was not the end. The galaxy was watching, and now the galaxy would remember. Humanity was no longer the weakest race. Humanity was no longer a joke. Humanity had become a storm. The alien lord had come to break them with a cruel laugh. But in the end, his joke had given them the one thing they needed most. The knowledge that even against impossible odds, even against gods and monsters, humanity's greatest power was not in gifts or weapons. It was in their will, their unity, their unbreakable spirit, and as the stars burned above, that spirit promised one thing. The story of humanity had only just begun.